So what do you do when you finally get your car back from the body shop following a front end fix? Well, if you're anything like me, you prepare it, you polish it and you protect it. So to see me do just that in what will be my first dedicated ceramic coating video, stay tuned. Having finally got a new front bumper painted and fitted following a bit of ass to grass action a few months back, decided now was the perfect time to treat the rest of the car to a polish and fresh layer of protection, and in order to recoup some of the repair costs which I'd covered myself to avoid a hike in insurance premiums, took Avalon King up on their offer of a sponsored video to see if I could properly ceramic coat the Nismo outdoors in the sun with their apparently easy to use Armour Shield 9 product. Now, I had been considering doing something ceramic coating related on the channel for a while, so the option to test a 9H do-it-yourself kit that can potentially provide up to 5 years of chemical resistant protection on my own car that sits outside exposed to the elements was a no-brainer. So as you can probably imagine, the car wasn't very dirty to begin with, as despite living outside it's regularly cleaned. But regardless of how clean a car might be, if it's being ceramic coated, still needs to be properly prepped to ensure the product adequately bonds and that you don't lock unsightly contaminants and defects in for years to come. Before coating my pearlescent white panels then, an external Decon 1 procedure was initiated, starting with a quick clean of the 20-inch candy red rims, which I haven't included a whole lot of footage of here, as I did do a dedicated wheel cleaning video with them quite recently, but still all 4 of them were given a quick maintenance wash in preparation for a couple of them being removed, polished and coated the following day. The rest of the exterior was then treated to a thorough pre-rinse, and there was no snow foam required here, as the 7,000 mile nooks and crannies never really allowed to get that ingrained. I then got going with a 2-bucket contact wash using a microfibre mitt and wax-free shampoo to lightly scrub the surface, as the aim here wasn't to pamper the paintwork but just to remove as much superficial dirt and contamination as possible. So spent some time under the watchful eye of the GoPro getting hands-on in the sun before thoroughly rinsing the car off again to allow me to then move on to the next stage of decontamination. A fallout remover was then liberally applied to all painted parts, excluding the new front bumper for obvious reasons, to pull out and dissolve any iron-based contamination that on light-coloured cars can be quite unsightly. After being left to sit for a minute or two, I grabbed some quick bleeding shots with the main camera to show the extent of the iron-based contamination, which, as you can see, was hardly excessive but was still enough to warrant wanting to remove. In an attempt to reduce any potentially damaging impact applying a potent acid-based product like this in the sun can have, I blanketed the car with snow foam, which would help keep it active that little bit longer. Then, to give it all a bit of a helping hand, took a second fresh microfibre mitt and gently washed the car over once more to neutralise the potent product underneath, knock back its stench a bit and provide a slightly more deeper clean than normal. One final thorough rinse was then undertaken to remove as much of the soap, iron remover and any remaining dirt as possible, plus no doubt aggravate the neighbours, but when you've got your pride and joy sitting in the sun soaking in potentially harmful chemicals, neighbourly considerations take a back seat. After being fully rinsed off, I then dried the car with a plush microfibre towel as there was no tar spots that needed chemically dealing with, and because it's only done 7,000 miles and I've kept on top of it with regular maintenance cleaning, felt invasive mechanical decontamination of the already smooth paintwork wasn't really necessary. Still, despite me breaking the rules, it is recommended that you physically decontaminate paintwork prior to coating, as unlike mine, most cars will benefit from it. Now, despite the finish being relatively swirl and scratch free, I still wanted to run a machine over it to brighten up the panels prior to coating and make the distinction between them and the freshly painted new front bumper, which had been given 8 coats of pearl to obtain an acceptable match, less obvious. Plus, I doubt the car had been machined since new, so made sense to do. I mostly use my trusty old Flex to moderately exfoliate the paintwork panel by panel and breathe some life back into it via a single stage polish then, which despite only including a few condensed clips of here to prove it was actually done, took me a fair few hours to complete. But after doing so and buffing off any residue with a fresh general purpose towel or two, was rewarded with 4-year-old paintwork that looked pretty damn good in the direct sun, and so was definitely ceramic coat worthy. Once the main areas had been polished with the prehistoric Flex, the tighter ones were tended to with a new MP9 micro polisher I bagged courtesy of Autobrite Direct, as although I don't usually have time to machine polish nooks and crannies, thought it would be rude not to here. And while polishing every tiny intricacy up to perfection is arguably overkill for a daily driver that lives outside, an affordable machine like this is still handy to have. So after spending the afternoon polishing and buffing to get everything up to standard, the car was then tucked in for the night under a light dust cover to keep pesky airborne contaminants and bear poo off the freshly prepped paintwork until the next morning. With the car back in position bright and early then, it was time to wipe everything down with an isopropyl alcohol mix to strip any polishing oils from the previous day's enhancement session, which is essential when applying a ceramic coating, as any kind of residue left on the surface can seriously jeopardise its long-term performance. So once the larger panels had been directly sprayed and thoroughly wiped over with a brand new general purpose towel so as not to inflict any marks on the freshly polished paintwork, any areas where overspray from direct application was undesirable were wiped over with a second towel that was spritzed with the IPA first. After the car had been thoroughly wiped down and was as naked as it possibly could be then, it was finally time to crack on with the armour shield ceramic coating, and as with most other parts of the car detailing process, started at the top with it, first coating the roof in a cross-hatch pattern with the supplied cloth-wrapped applicator block once it had been primed with a few drops. Once applied, you need to let it sit on the surface until it begins to flash off, which, like most coatings, is indicated by the presence of an iridescent or rainbow-like shimmer. Now, the coating's instructions do outline general flash times, which for me in the mid-morning sun was around 5 minutes. However, despite keeping a close eye on it, didn't clock any obvious signs of flashing, so left it an extra minute or so and buffed off anyway, as I didn't want to push my luck. I then purposefully coated the glass and gloss black plastic trim instead to see if it could be detected there, which thankfully it could, so guess it was just a case of not being able to see on the bright white paintwork in the direct sunlight, but either way, as long as I kept my eye on the temperature and adjusted the time it sat on the surface accordingly, figured it should be fine. Despite being outside exposed to the sun and constant array of other unsavoury distractions, the Avalon King coating process was actually a pretty pleasant affair, spreading and removing with incredible ease, so credit where credit's due as it took the sun and outdoor air in its stride. Now, while it took me a lot longer than it should have to complete, assuming you're not filming every aspect of it from multiple angles for a YouTube video, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get a car sufficiently coated with this product in well under an hour, which, considering it should provide years of protection, isn't a bad deal. So the third and final day saw me whip a couple of wheels off, as following my involuntary off-roading there was a few unsightly scuffs that needed polishing out, so figured I might as well coat them afterwards to finish the job. So following another quick prep wash on a dodgy roller stand I'd picked up last minute as a budget alternative to the more expensive wheel cleaning stands, once again reached for the handy MP9 machine, this time making use of its rotary head with 1-inch polishing pad to steadily knock back the marks, and while I knew I wouldn't be able to safely rectify all of the problem areas, so long as they were hardly noticeable when back on the car, I was happy. Once the awkward spokes had been given a good going over, the barrels of the wheels were tended to, this time in dual action fashion, as all they really needed was a light pick-me-up prior to coating, so cracked on with that, buffing away any light residue once done. Prior to being protected, much like the bodywork the day before, all areas of the freshly polished wheels were then given a soak and subsequent wipe down with IPA to leave the candy red surface as clean and residue free as possible, as again there's no point in coating things if they haven't been completely stripped first. There was still plenty of armour shield left to coat the flash red wheels with, so got to work doing just that, first tending to the barrels, which was a pretty straightforward affair, although I'm not sure if the dodgy roller stand the wheel was sitting on made things easier or more awkward, and because the temperature was a bit lower here than the day before, the coating was left to sit for a little bit longer, but it still buffed off with ease and left the surface looking and feeling super slick. The same process was then repeated for the face of the wheel, although because the spokes made it a bit awkward to use the supplied applicator block even after being chopped in half, decided to use a small neatly folded piece of a lint-free glass cleaning towel. Not sure why I didn't just remove the cloth from the block itself and use that by hand, but sometimes the blatantly obvious passes you by when filming. Still, it seemed to do the job just fine, and again, once it had been left for a fair few minutes to do its thing, was wiped over with a contrasting coloured towel to leave a nice streak-free finish. And aside from them binning the spent towels, as the hardened coating crystals now contained within their fibres render them no good for repeat use, that was pretty much that. So as far as I could tell, on both the wheels and the bodywork, the Avalon King coating had definitely done its job. Granted, the treated parts had also been polished, but there was definitely an additional gloss factor and super slick feel to the paintwork that polishing alone wouldn't necessarily achieve. If you've got the time and inclination, a second coat can be applied a few hours later, and while it certainly won't do any harm, is generally a means of ensuring all areas have received adequate coverage more so than doubling up on protection. But as you can see, the single coat that I'd applied had still left my pearlescent white curves and contours glowing. Despite not having the luxury of a controlled environment, the Armour Shield 9 was still incredibly easy to use, leaving no stubborn streaks or high spots behind, even after being left to sit in the direct sun. And while it's recommended that you don't wash or expose a coated car to water for about a week, had to spray it down for some premature repellency shots here, but did ensure I waited the minimum 48 hours before doing so. As you can see, it seemed to steadily sheet water rather than tightly bead it, but with ceramic coatings often having issues with spotting, the more water that can be shed from the surface by the product, the better. Obviously, I can't comment on long-term durability, however these parting shots should give you some idea of what to expect from the product. But either way, it'll be interesting to see how something applied in an improper environment will hold up on a car that lives outside. So cheers to Avalon King for reaching out and giving this garageless tramp the sponsored kick up the backside he needed to finally get something ceramic coating related uploaded. If you like what you see, check out the link below for a generous $25 off. And of course, cheers to you once again for tuning in.